Today's Total Soccer Show is sponsored by Ruffneck Scarves, official providers of soccer scarves for US Soccer, MLS, NCAA, and the USL. And the Total Soccer Show. The Ruffneck is the official provider of the Total Soccer Show scarf. I want to say thank you to all the people who opened a TSS scarf on Christmas Day and sent us a picture of it via Twitter. Really enjoyed seeing those scarves. If you would like to get 20% off a purchase at ruffneckscarves.com, you can go to ruffneckscarves.com, RUFFNECK, scarves.com. Use the coupon Total Soccer Show at checkout. You'll get 20% off. Thank you to Ruffneck Scarves for sponsoring today's show. Hello and welcome back to the Total Soccer Show. I am Daryl Grove and I'm joined by a man in a nice new chair. It's Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello. New chairs indeed, man.
Yep.
Lumbar support.
We upgraded the office. We now have lumbar support, neck support, good bouncy mesh, less squeaky.
And more chalk.
Those
are our big upgrades.
We did some office shopping at the end of the Christmas period.
We went white and multicolored chalk because that's how we roll.
So we've taken our holiday break. We saw on Twitter that people were getting a little anxious and itchy feet, if I do say so, for TSS to come back because there's big news, Taylor. Bob Bradley fired by Swansea City sooner than expected. At least when he took over, it was sooner than expected. We've been talking about January transfer window. At least he'll get that fire, get to buy his players. No, he doesn't.
Yeah, he was talking about that too, before and after his firing, that he was expecting to have his players come in, that I guess there'd been some conversations about players they targeted, about players he wanted.
Yep.
All that for naught, because Bob Bradley no longer employed by Swansea.
So I've noticed that the conversation about Bob Bradley being fired has got very passionate. I feel like there's a lot of American soccer fans are obviously like angry that their American coach was fired and they feel like there's some sort of xenophobic reasons. We're going to try and look at it dispassionately. Is that fair?
We'll try. I mean, I don't know if we can because I am American, and so it's a thing I've been wondering is if this were another coach, let's say somebody promoted from the championship, would I care? And the answer is no, because it's another Premier League coach. The Premier League managers occasionally get fired, and so it's a thing that happens. I think it's just because I have more of an interest in it and more of a specific interest in Bob Bradley that it does kind of color the way I see events a little bit, and I'll just say that up front.
Yeah, should we start with our emotions then? Get those out of the way.
Yes.
I got to say, I am a little surprised because, it's not even January, and also really disappointed because I feel like this was the one shot for an American soccer coach to get established in the Premier League. And it was a long shot, right? Because Swansea are not a great team. And we'll get into some of that a little later on. And I feel like Bob Bradley took aim, tried his hardest, missed the target. And now there won't be another shot for an American coach for a good long while.
Yeah, I think all of that is correct. I think outside of maybe somebody getting promoted like David Wagner, if Huddersfield came up, maybe then.
You mean German-American?
Exactly. I mean, I think the thing here was that it's an American being brought in a crisis situation, and I think that exacerbated things. I do think that he was an American, brought a little more attention to him as a result, specifically because of the American owners. That didn't help things. So I think in that situation, it was a very let's see what he can do, and I think you and I both thought that he would maybe not swim right away. Maybe it wouldn't be like a Michael Phelps-esque performance, but he wouldn't sink, and that seems to be what's happened.
So I want to say I think Bradley has underperformed as coach of Swansea, and maybe even though it's really tough they didn't get the January window, I think what he was trying to get Swansea to do was never going to work.
Agreed.
So we watched the 4-1 defeat at home to West Ham, right, which is an absolute beating. At home to West Ham, which seems to be the thing that really sealed his fate. It was like next day, right? He was fired. And it looked like a team that was kind of naive, that was like dedicated to short passing and trying to play some nice football, and then West Ham just smashed them for it.
It feels to me, and this is the best analogy I could come up with, it feels like when I've only tried once to play Football Manager, and it felt like that to me, where it was all of a sudden there was all this other stuff that you have to do. That when I don't know if you've played Football Manager recently.
Not recently, but I've spent many years.
So you'll know probably way better than I that it's like, who is this? What am I supposed to do? This guy needs to train. How do I train him?
It's very overwhelming to begin with. Right?
Exactly, and I think that you kind of have to be familiar with it. And what ended up happening with me with Football Manager was that it was like sometimes I had to get a result. And I'd be like, yeah, I got a result. And then a lot of times I would lose. And I didn't really know why one happened and why the other one happened when it happened. And it felt a little bit like that with Bob Bradley, that sometimes he was getting results, sometimes they were scoring, but they were also conceding a lot. And it never felt like he was building towards something very specific.
But this sounds like you're almost saying that Bob Bradley doesn't know what he's doing, which, we follow Bradley's career. That's absolutely not the case, right? He's I think of him as a really good coach who sort of is really good at setting out a plan and getting his team to execute it.
I think we think of him as a practical coach and a guy who can kind of know the limits of the team that he has and find ways to utilize that talent effectively.
And to beat Spain in the Confederations Cup semi-final.
There we go. But I mean, to deal with difficult situations, we've talked about with Egypt, to find ways to take a team that's struggling in Norway and make them perform and overperform. I think the idea is that we thought he was going to be practical, that we thought he would approach this with, I need to, and he said it himself that we wanted to play a certain way, but obviously getting points and not getting relegated is the priority at first. And it just seems like he was caught in the middle of, I want to play this exciting soccer so people know what I'm about, but I want to get results too.
This is what I think. I think all the stuff about being an American going against him, I think if anything, based on his early interviews, he was too interested in proving that an American coach could come to the Premier League and play good soccer, which is not what Swansea needed. So if we get into the Swansea-West Ham game, which we just watched last night and this morning, right? It's a lot of short passing. It's a lot of really elaborate short passing that goes nowhere. And when it tries to end up with a through ball, it goes loose, right? Baston or Routledge or Sigurdsson doesn't quite collect it. Right. And eventually West Ham go and score up the other end. And I think if you'd have had a more practical English manager who kind of knew that the Premier League relegation survival is just about doing the nasty thing and getting points where you can, I think Bob Bradley might have gone back and said, all right, forget all that short passing stuff. Let's get two defensive midfielders. Let's play some long balls to Fernando Llorente. I
mean, it's slightly unfair because I think Crystal Palace have a better squad. I mean, they do. It's not even a controversial statement to say that. But Big Sam's going to get results. In those first three games, you will see a different Crystal Palace team than you've seen under Alan Pardew. So I think right there is your example that you want to play a manager in these situations, if you're Swansea, who knows how to relegation battle. And you want a man like Sam Allardyce or Tony Pulis would be the other big one that kind of has been there before, knows how to come in, knows how to no nonsense. Look, we're playing this way. If you don't like it, then you're not going to play. You can ask for a transfer. We're going to work hard. You're going to be drilled. You're going to be organized. This is what we're going to do. It's going to be 4-2-3-1. We're going to shield the defense because our center backs are bad. We're going to have a big guy up top who's going to settle the ball. We're going to make things happen. This is how we're getting it done.
Doesn't it? It pains me that I kind of think all the British pundits, the ones who are, I want to say they're saying it xenophobically and myopically, that you need an English manager or you need someone with Premier League or English League experience, someone who knows how to relegation battle. It sounds so blowhard and dismissive and ignorant of Bob Bradley's career. But at the same time, based on watching Swansea play, it's also correct.
Yeah.
He had them playing a naive form of soccer that, again, a Sam Allardyce would not have done. Steve Bruce would not have done.
Okay, here's the way I can explain it, is that, Bob Bradley can, and I know he came in and said, I think I'm as good of a coach as Guardiola or Klopp or whatever, but he can say, I want to play this specific style, and he could have a whole dossier on just removing the relegation battle from a second. If he had come in beginning of the season, he's got a full summer window ahead of him, and he says, I want to play this way. We're going to play possession soccer. It's going to be quick passing. It's going to be moving. People might be okay with it, but they'd also be like, he's an American. I don't know. He lives in France, whatever. But then if Guardiola comes in and says, we're doing this, it's we're doing this. Guardiola has said that.
Yeah.
And I think to some extent that is what Big Sam is. That's what Tony Pulis is when it comes to relegation. It's a person who comes in.
They're the Guardiolas of relegation.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, Big Sam has never been relegated. That's a statement that not a lot of managers in the Premier League can make because they've either been fired because they were going to be relegated or haven't been there long enough to be in a relegation battle. But if Big Sam comes in and says, we're playing 4-2-3-1, kicking it long to Llorente, Gylfi's going to run off, we're going to make things happen. People are into it. It's he knows what he's doing. He's been here before. Let's get in. Whereas if Bob Bradley says that, it's it's kind of standard. It's kind of simple. Maybe we could try that. I think he doesn't quite have that ringing endorsement behind him that weirdly Big Sam and Tony Pulis do.
And then it ended with a 4-1 defeat at home to West Ham, as we said. I've got the stats in front of me. In 11 games, Bob Bradley only got 11 games with Swansea in the Premier League, conceded 29 goals. Won 2, lost 7, drew 2. It's not enough. It's not enough.
I mean, because even with, it was a better points per game than Giedelen had, but it's still factors out, I forget who did the math, but it was like 28 points, which is going to be relegation.
Yeah.
So even at that rate, it's not good enough. I think my favorite comment I've seen came from a Redditor. It was Rovark, Rhovark, who said, several things can be true at once. For example, Swansea shouldn't have sacked Gideon. They probably shouldn't have hired Bradley. But once they hired him, they were very unfair to him and didn't give him an actual chance, just a run of games with a demoralized squad and no transfer window to make his mark on the team. I think all that's true. I think you could make the argument that maybe they were premature in getting rid of Gideon. I think you could make the argument that maybe there were other factors at play with bringing in Bob Bradley.
Yeah.
And then I think you could make the argument, though, that once you've brought him in, he deserves time to get settled, to bring in a few players. Obviously, that back line was weak. You kind of reinforce there. Maybe he starts getting results, but maybe isn't what you need when it's a relegation scrap.
And you heard him, you listened to the Talk Sport interview, right, where they called him up, and he essentially said, he did a swear on British radio.
He sure did.
He was not happy, is not the word he used.
I'm a little peed off.
Yeah, exactly, that's a good one, yeah.
And then I love this, sorry to interrupt, but I love that so much because it was such a stupid question, because it was like, how are you feeling, Bob? Or like, what are your thoughts this morning? And he just said that, and that was it. And then it was like a 3 Mississippi awkward silence, and then they scrambled to be like, well, yeah, I mean, obviously. And it was just sort of like, yeah, what do you expect, man?
Well, part of the awkward silence was for the swearing.
I see. It made me laugh in a moment of like, oh, poor Bob. Oh, it's kind of funny, though.
But listening to Bob Bradley, and again, I've got to say, I am a big fan of Bob Bradley, right? I kind of enjoyed his US national team. I've enjoyed his work with Egypt and Stuybeck and Le Havre. I really wanted him to succeed. But when you listen to that interview, he sounded kind of naive in several ways. One of them being like, he was talking about how the work was going well and things were progressing, and he seemed to think of it as this long-term project where he sort of, even though he said in like press conferences he knows that we need points straight away, but he seemed to think that it was good enough that he was slowly getting there, and it's not good enough, right? Things were not good enough to even get you to January, because Premier League is all about getting results right now, not about slowly building it and hoping it comes good in March.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was getting at again with that Football Manager reference, is that, I mean, obviously he knows how to like run a dressing room and organize training sessions. I did not know how to do that in a Football Manager. But what I mean is that you can say we're building towards something, but when you win a game 5-4 or 4-3, but then you lose 4-1, but then it's 3-1, like it doesn't show me that you're building to something. It shows me that you're like, oh, we can get some goals, and I'm going to make these 2 substitutions at halftime. I'm going to change this stuff around.
Yeah.
It doesn't show me that you're building to anything. It shows that you have this idea that there will be patience, I will be given time, so I can kind of figure things out. And again, I think other managers would have been like, no time to figure things out. Let's play really boring, but get results.
And I think the best example of this is how much the defence got switched around. I've seen Amat, Fernandez, Mawson, and I think it's Van der Hoorn, the Dutch defender. I've seen excuse me. I've seen all of those, that combination of all of those guys played, and you've never seen the defence look settled.
No.
I think maybe one of the best examples was the third goal West Ham scored. It's Antonio scores it, and it's a defence that basically 3 or 4 of them step out for offside, but Nathan Dyer, who's just been beaten at the end line, is still standing behind everybody, playing Antonio onside.
Yeah, he slid out of bounds trying to block a shot that was still delivered.
Yeah,
and
Antonio cut back inside, right? So he left him on the floor.
Yeah, and then Dyer doesn't really sprint to get clear. He doesn't sprint to hold that line. He slowly jogs out and keeps people onside. And you can see the rest of the Swansea defense be like, no, that guy's definitely offside. And then they all slowly look and realize and then like hang their heads in shame.
I can't remember if it's Mawson or Van der Hoorn, but one of them spots Dyer behind and is like, oh, I see what's happened.
But I get your point, though, that, again, with another manager who is going to come in and say, look, we are shipping goals, we are going to fix this.
Yeah.
All we're doing is drilling on stepping out. Like it would be drilled in at this point.
And I really feel like he's, based on watching Swansea play, I feel like he's worked on trying to get some nice, short passing possession soccer going, because that's what Swansea were doing a lot of, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like, I mean, you can practice that and you can practice defending, but ultimately you've still got to prioritise something, right? So maybe they should have prioritised heading the ball clear and stepping out.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, probably.
And maybe just as a general tactic, they should have gone to, hey, we've got this massive Spanish guy who's really dangerous in the air. Maybe we just defend hard and then bang it up to him and see what happens.
Yeah. And so I think you're right in the end that, and I know we have a lot more to talk about with this, but I think you're right in the end that those pundits who were critical were right, but I think they were technically right. Not necessarily right.
Were they right for the wrong reasons?
Yeah, because I think a lot of the argument was like, oh, he doesn't know players. He doesn't know how to manage like a fixture congestion. He doesn't know how to do this. It wasn't I mean, some people might have made that argument, but I feel like it wasn't this. He doesn't necessarily know how to do a relegation battle. He doesn't know how to play practical soccer and drill people to get them playing a very functional way. Like, I didn't hear people say that. And I did hear some of that anti-American bias, I think.
Well, let's talk about that. How much of Bob Bradley being American played into his his sort of somewhat unpopularity? Like, they were booed at the end of the game, right? At the end of that 4-1 game. And how much of that played into his being fired earlier than expected?
I think probably not as much as I wanted to believe yesterday is my answer. Because, and part of that is The Game podcast hosted by Gabriel Marcotti.
Yeah, it's good.
They talked a little bit about how it seems like maybe that's more of the American press has covered the Americanness of Bob Bradley.
Because we're more invested in it, right? Like we talked about at the start, we're more invested in having an American coach succeed, so we focus on that aspect more.
Right, and we focus on that aspect more, and so as a result, I think we might focus on the question he gets about why does he say PK versus the other 8 questions about why isn't your defense defending. We don't necessarily focus on that, and those questions probably are getting asked. It's just that's not the easy story to write about, especially if you're an American journalist. Right. So it probably isn't such a everybody hates him because he speaks English a different way than we want him to speak English. But I think part of it does seem like maybe just because he is an American, because he doesn't have that resume behind him, and it's probably more the resume than the accent, that maybe people just kind of don't buy into what he's trying to do as much as they would if it were somebody else who they knew and respected a little bit more.
I have a slightly different take on why Bob Bradley's Americanness works against him, and it's because of the owners. The new sort of majority shareholder owners' Americanness makes him tied to them. Right, it's Levine and Kaplan who sort of took over recently, not popular with the fans. So the fans see Bob Bradley as related to this new ownership group, and maybe for them it's sort of it was easier to fire him to take away
for
some
them.
of the,
You mean the owners?
Yeah, for the owners, and Hugh Jenkins, the Welsh chairman, who's now sort of he's tied to the new American majority shareholders. So for them to like relieve some of the pressure of their unpopularity, maybe it's better for them to get rid of the American coach who's who's become a symbol of their regime.
And this is where I think like earlier,
you notice it's Welsh people who are in line to like people being mentioned as the next coach are Ryan Giggs and Chris Coleman.
I think Chris Coleman's already turned it down, or at least his wife has, I believe. And I think earlier when I was saying that like my Americanness is probably part of my feeling towards Bob Bradley, I think here's what I'm talking about, which is that when we talked about Bradley coming into Swansea, we know him from U.S. national team, from following with Egypt, and then from following passively, I'd say, in Norway and France. So we had this idea of like, no, we know what he's about, we know who he's going to be, he's going to be good. And I think in retrospect, we were realizing that like there's no other coach that's gotten this opportunity, really. It's always been a coach who like at the very least like won the Norwegian Premier League and then got a gig, like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and also had that Premier League pedigree as a player.
Also in Wales, right?
Yeah, true. But it's never been a guy who was like, he did okay in Norway, got them to the Europa League, didn't get this League 2 team promoted, but almost did. Like, it really does, when you look at it from an objective, neutral perspective, you are sort of like, maybe that wasn't the smartest decision to bring in this guy. Right. And maybe it was just because he was American and you knew him.
And if we're honest, right, if the ownership wasn't
I just want to amend that to say, obviously, Bob Bradley, again, I'm a big fan of his. He has the qualifications. I'm not saying it was just because he was American, but I do think that was a big part of why he got the opportunity, and that's kind of all she wrote.
Well, I'll say this. Jason Levine, Steve Kaplan, majority shareholders, there's no other ownership group in the Premier League that would have hired Bob Bradley.
No.
Their Americanness does play into them hiring Bob Bradley. I think it's like when a coach takes over and say the coach is Dutch, and suddenly the Dutch coach starts signing Dutch players. Right?
Yeah, or like when they, I guess it's not quite the same, but it's like when the coach moves from, say, Swansea to Liverpool and then signs Swansea players.
Yeah.
Like, it's sort of like that.
And it's because it's not just that you only know what you know. It's more like you maybe think you have some inside knowledge, right? Like, if I was the Wolves manager tomorrow, I would sign some Americans that people don't know about. You know what I'm saying? I would bid big money for Darlington Nagby, for example.
Yeah. Big money meaning more than $3 million, I believe. Yes. Okay. So there is that relationship. But you mentioned that the owners were unpopular to begin with.
And this is part of a bigger problem at Swansea City, right? So again, it's not all Bob Bradley's fault. The club is kind of in trouble, not financially, but in terms of stability and the feeling around the club and where everything is going.
Right.
Do you want to do some Swansea City history?
I want you to, because I know you've done the research and it's pretty fascinating.
So I don't have all the details. It's kind of complicated, but essentially...
You don't have all of the financial ins and outs of a major Premier League club.
Paperwork.
All right.
I did see the NBC, I want to call it a documentary, Jack to a King, which is all about the Swansea City success story, which is in 2001, 2002, they were in real trouble. Like, they financially were possibly going out of business, right? The fans sort of banded together. People put some money in. Supporters Trust gave Swansea Trust some money. They managed to get enough money together. They literally passed a bucket around and got some local investors to put money in to keep the club solvent.
Sorry, they literally passed a bucket?
They literally passed a bucket around. As in, there was a plastic bucket that was passed around and people put money in it.
All right.
That is a literally correct use of the word literally. Nothing figurative about it.
I believed you. I was just sort of surprised to hear that.
Yeah, that's one of the things they did, right?
Yep.
And then as well, there were other sort of... the shareholders became like local hoteliers or local businessmen. There was that famous, not famous, Swansea famous, I guess, Dutch fan. He was in the Netherlands, but was weirdly a Swansea City fan.
Yeah.
And he was like, all right, I'm going to invest £50,000 in this team to keep them going, right? And that's been the Swansea City story for the last 10, 12 years. And they've climbed up through the division with this sort of weird family feeling about it. Right? But what happened this past, I want to say April, maybe summer, it was finalised, is these two American owners, Jason Levine, Steve Kaplan. I think Levine is related to DC United as well. Or maybe it's Kaplan. I can't remember, sorry. They came in and basically sneakily bought all the shares up and cut the Supporters Trust out of the governing process of Swansea City. Supporters Trust really, really angry about it.
Can you explain how they did that? How did they undercut the Supporters Trust?
From what I understand, so there are obviously that Dutch guy owns 5% of shares, right? His shares, £50,000 he bought them for. I think he got something like $5 million for those shares when they bought it. So I think without consulting the Supporters Trust, which they're supposed to do, they went around and set up deals with all these people to give them was it like 100-fold return on their money? It's really hard to say no to that.
That would be about that.
Yeah. It's really hard to say no to that.
Yeah, of course.
And then suddenly the Supporters Trust, I think they had to be notified, but they did it at the very last minute when it was already happening and everybody else was selling. So Supporters Trust still owns a chunk. I think it's like 20%, but they don't. That's not enough to have any say, right? That's having it's like being the minority party in Congress, right?
Yeah.
You can't do much with it.
Nope, can't. And I mean, and I would venture to guess that probably a lot of those deals weren't done in correspondence with the other people. So that Dutch fan, for example, probably didn't know that the hotelier was also getting ready to sell his shares, or even if he did, it's like, well, I am and he is, but he has 3%, I have 2%, so that's 5% between us. That's no big deal. But then you don't realize that everyone else is being kind of aggressively pursued and aggressively overpaid for their share of the club.
And so this feel-good story, and I honestly believe that was the heart of the club. That was sort of what explained the bizarre almost rise and success of this Phoenix-like team for the last few years. It seems to me that as soon as you take that out of it, and now the Supporters Trust doesn't feel like they have a say in the running of the club, now it's really two American businessmen have come in, got majority of the shares. They know there's a big Premier League TV deal starting next season. All of a sudden, things start falling apart. Ashley Williams leaves, Welsh player leaves. Joe Allen, they don't bid enough for Joe Allen this past summer. They could have had him back from Liverpool. He went to Stoke. The story is they bid $8 million for Joe Allen. Stoke bid $13 million. Joe Allen wanted to go back to Swansea. They wouldn't bid anymore. I've got to feel like if it was Swansea fans still running the team, they would have been like, we'll give you all the money for Joe Allen. Yeah. Have all the money.
I mean, or the other one that I know you told me off air was Wilfred Boney, who was available for a loan from Man City.
Yep. Also Stoke.
Yeah, could have gone to Swansea, went to Stoke. And if I remember vividly the video of Wilfred Boney going into Swansea training, singing the Wilfred Boney song. He enjoyed his time at Swansea.
Instead, they spent $15.5 million on Borja Baston.
Yeah.
And that has not gone well.
No, not so much. Not so much.
So I think there's the bigger picture stuff there that's not just Bob Bradley's fault, but he's the guy that sort of was pulled into the middle of this club that is sort of literally changing mentality. The regime has changed the mentality of what's happening. And ironically, they won't get that big Premier League TV deal if they get relegated this season.
Seems very likely. And it also seems sort of like, to go back to your point about him being kind of the sacrificial lamb, this is where I think that's accurate, is because he's sort of, whether or not it was intentional, he's a name that is sort of you can get rid of. And,
oh, yeah, definitely.
I mean, and not from an American perspective, it bums me out, but he's not a big name. Say they bring in Big Sam and results don't go their way, and then they fire Big Sam. That's a huge story. Whereas Bob Bradley is someone you can probably get for relatively cheap because he wants to try to prove himself.
Yep.
And then when it doesn't work out, you can kind of throw him away and move on. And yeah, it's going to be a huge problem for his career. And I think that's part of the reason why he's very angry, amongst other reasons.
Yeah.
But then you can go out and sign somebody else and even go the full, like, mea culpa, we thought we knew what we were doing. Clearly the fans are really important. So from now on, we're consulting with you guys and we've heard you. And like, it can also be made kind of the scapegoat in a way of like, we realize you don't like him. So we got rid of him. We did that for you. Now let's build together as a community.
I think that's exactly one of the reasons they fought. Plus, conceding an average of more than 2 goals a game.
So again, I think it comes down to there are many reasons why it wasn't working, and Bob Bradley definitely bears some of that responsibility. But there's a lot of other factors at play.
He should have been more cynical because Swansea, in the end, were more cynical.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
and the Premier League is cynical, and you've got to be hardened and cynical, and just working hard and doing the right thing does not keep your job in the Premier League.
It does not. And
can we talk about the future? Like, of American coaches in general, but also of Bob Bradley himself.
That's literally what I wanted to do.
Is that right? How big of a blow is this to Bob Bradley's career? Where does he go next?
It's a pretty big blow, I think, because it is a complete failure. Like you really can't
spin it, can you?
I mean, it's like trying to spin William Henry Harrison, who I believe is the president who died after his address and caught pneumonia.
Yeah.
Like, you can't really spin like those first 41 days, though. He changed everything, or however many days he had in office. It's sort of like that. Like, it would be very tough. It's the type of thing that if it were like an actual job on your resume, you would leave that job off your resume and just say like, yeah, I was unemployed for 3 months while I was job hunting. I got the points per game up by 0.27 or something. Like, no one wants to hear that. So it's going to take some explaining, and I think it will probably set him back a little bit.
Is there any element of like the Premier League is the big show? And just even to be involved in it for 11 games is a plus on your resume to someone?
No, because I think it is. I think it is the big show, but it's Major League Baseball is the show,
right.
And then if you get called up from the AAA team and you strike out 6 times in a row and you get sent back, you've proven that you can't exist at that level,
and you're unlikely to get back to the show.
Yeah. Now I'm not saying that's Bob. I'm not saying Bob Bradley has done that, but I'm saying that it makes his next move very important. And so it will be interesting to see what he does, because if he tries to stay in England and get a championship team, I think that wouldn't be the worst idea, because I do think
that's so hit and miss though, right? A championship team can go either way.
Very true. But I think if he were to go there, establish a team, work his way up, get them promoted, you're not going to see nearly as much criticism because he's been there and worked his way up. If he goes elsewhere, I think you were saying that there's been links with him in the Norwegian national team.
Yeah, so the Norwegian national team coach recently resigned, I think like November-ish, and the Stuybeck sporting director, who obviously worked with Bradley when Bradley was the coach, said, hey, we should get this guy while he's available. He's the perfect fit for the Norwegian national team. He's got all this international experience with the USA, with Egypt. That doesn't not make sense.
It doesn't, but then you kind of go down that route of you become a national team manager.
Yeah.
And I do think some people are wary to take a guy who, the joke is what works like one weekend every 3 months and then 2 weeks in the summer, and give him an everyday, 18-hour-a-day job.
Yeah.
So my guess is that it will be either maybe he'll take a national team gig, or he will take a less heralded position in a less heralded football country.
Or maybe back to somewhere in Scandinavia, maybe back to Norway, not the national team, but a bigger club team, because Stuybeck were not a big team, right? Like part of his success there was he overachieved with Stuybeck.
I think it will have to be places where he is known, and I think the obvious one in that regard becomes, if he chooses to go that route, is LAFC. And you kind of go in there, you wait a year, you build it up, you kind of build the program the way you want to. You learn from Atlanta that signing players and having everything kind of set before the season starts is a very good idea. And Bob Bradley could be a big part of that.
Well, so his previous experience with an MLS expansion team was Chicago Fire, 1998, comes in, wins MLS Cup and US Open Cup. So he's definitely got previous in terms of successful expansion teams.
The only thing I would say that goes against it is that I don't think anyone in the Bradley family has a history of choosing a big money move to Major League Soccer over staying in Europe. It worked for Mikey, almost this season it worked for Michael. But so I think that is a possibility, but that's what I mean when I say it will be interesting, because that obviously represents a change in his approach, because it's always been
built towards the Premier League, right? That's what Scandinavia. So I keep saying Scandinavia. Norway was building towards Premier League, then Ligue 2, Le Havre was a step towards the Premier League, then the Premier League was the big step, and then it's sort of like you got all those steps, then you fall off the top. Where do you go?
Yeah, and I think based solely on like my limited understanding of Bob Bradley, having never spoken with the man except in press conferences after U.S. games, which doesn't really count. You get to ask one question quickly.
Yeah, I did the same thing. Yeah. I'm sure he remembers us both.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. I would. My guess is that he sticks around and tries to get another bite at the Premier League apple. Because he doesn't strike me as a person who is sort of like,
he's not getting it.
Tried it.
No one's going to hire someone who just had an 11-game spell that went bad.
No, but if you go, I don't know, say Bundesliga 2, and you get promoted, and then you prove that you exist in the Bundesliga, then maybe you get another option at like a struggling Premier League team. Maybe not even a struggling Premier League team, but like a championship team, and then you work your way up. Like I think that's what it has to be, and I think that's how American coaches can succeed, which I think is the other part of this equation.
Yeah, so going back around to the very start of this conversation, we asked if Bradley getting fired means that there are no American coaches, except for maybe David Wagner getting promoted with Huddersfield, no American coaches right now who we can reasonably expect will get a job in the Premier League. I think one of the things I'm thinking of is it's not just that Bradley got fired means there's less chance of an American coach. It's not as if like now all American coaches are somehow like radioactive.
Yeah.
It's more that he was the only one with the resume.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, even close, because I think Major League Soccer is still such a confusing and unknown entity to so many clubs and FAs that I don't know how much weight winning Major League Soccer carries for people. Right. I don't know if when Caleb Porter or Brian Schmetzer win MLS Cup, if clubs are looking at that as like, oh, he's done it, let's bring him in, the way they would say if some young upstart coach won the Eredivisie or the Bundesliga or the Portuguese Liga. I mean, it would carry more weight, I think.
Part of that I feel like is MLS's fault because it's this weird closed system where like everything functions kind of differently. Yeah. Right? Like, Bob Bradley, I'm not saying this is the reason he did it, but Bob Bradley was talking about how, they were doing good work and they were getting there. That's kind of okay in MLS. You can have a whole season to build for the next season. Yeah. This is a promotion relegation thing, basically, right? You don't face it in Major League Soccer.
And you have playoffs, and if you make the playoffs and you get hot for 7 games, you can win. But that doesn't mean that you just
mentioned Porter and Schmetzer, right?
Yeah.
They had these great end of seasons that won them championships, but you haven't won the Eredivisie over like 30-something games.
No, I mean, I think both times they were the last team into the playoffs, both Portland and Seattle when they won. So, I mean, versus proving it over 34 or 40 games, it carries more weight.
So what does this mean for, say, Greg Berhalter, Jesse Marsh? Like, I'm thinking of like young up-and-coming coaches who are kind of exciting and playing an interesting brand of soccer who've had some success. Like, I feel like they could win the next 3 MLS Cups and it would still be their best, or Pareja maybe, their best option would be US national team coach. Or maybe you get offered a Scandinavian job. Even Bruce Arena, his only ever European offer, I heard him say in an interview, I can't remember who with, was Brøndby in 2006. And in the end, he was like, meh.
Yeah. So I have 2 theories on this. I think the first is that for players like, say, Berhalter, who did play in Germany, did play in Scandinavia, correct?
He managed in Sweden, Hammarby.
Yeah. So, and I mean, eventually
played for Crystal Palace.
Eventually was fired by Hammarby, so maybe not great. But I think for players that have relationships in those countries, say they played 5 years in the Bundesliga or 3 years in Sweden, they probably know people there. They probably have contacts there. And so I think you could see that step of Berhalter goes back to Sweden or Berhalter goes to Germany and gets an opportunity with the Bundesliga 2 club and works his way up.
We did the research earlier, right, looking for U.S. coaches.
Well, that's my second point, is that's coaches going from Major League Soccer to Europe. I think the more logical one, and the one that I wish were more could happen more often or could more readily, but I don't think it can, is a player who's been with a club for a really long time, then transitions into coaching, getting his badges, starting with the youth team, working his way up.
And his name is?
Steve Cherundolo.
Steve Cherundolo is the assistant coach at Hanover right now in Bundesliga 2, I believe. I think they're second in Bundesliga 2. So they're possibly getting promoted next season. And I think you're right. If we're looking at the future of American coaches, it's going to be guys who, because we just said MLS is not really a path to it. Even success with the US national team is not necessarily a path to success. Because even Bradley had to go all the way around the houses to get to Swansea. Right? Yeah. So maybe the future is you have a whole career with a European team and you work your way up.
Yeah, because again, not saying that Steve Cherundolo is the next Guardiola or Zidane, but I mean that's how those two.
He might be the next Hanover coach. Yeah, eventually,
and that's how those two gents got their gigs. And then even look at somebody like Patrick Vieira, who was with City for maybe 2 seasons, but I think they recognize this is a guy that we can build with that we want involved in our future.
Well, ironically, he's ended up in MLS.
Yeah, but with a direct link back to Manchester City, I think, or any of the other City-owned clubs. So I think that is what presents a more logical route. The problem then is that you have a lot of people who've gone back to Major League Soccer. So you don't have, say, Michael Bradley at Chievo or Roma and becomes kind of an institution there. He's there for 8 seasons and then sort of transitions into a managerial role.
Yeah. He's like Totti's assistant coach.
Oh, that'd be so good.
When Totti
That'd be so good.
Francesco Totti's going to manage Roma at some point.
Yeah. Or, Jose Altidore at AZ stays there. Like, there's so much movement and then there's so much return to domestic soccer.
Yeah. Once you become big enough, you kind of get pulled back for that big MLS DP paycheck, right?
Yeah.
So it's maybe not going to happen.
We'll see. Jeff Cameron at Stoke? Potentially?
That's our best hope right now.
Yeah.
Christian Pulisic in 20 years could be the Borussia Dortmund youth team coach.
Sure. We got some time for that one, though. No rush on that one, Christian.
Anything else to add to this Bob Bradley conversation?
We still love Bob. We still love you, Bob.
We do, and I really hope he goes somewhere and sort of has big success.
Let's just rewind that clock all the way back, and Bob Bradley becomes Bruce Arena's assistant. U.S. national team 2.0.
Could that happen?
I mean, yeah. I think he wouldn't take it.
Right.
That's a dramatic step back.
Do you feel like Bruce Arena's keeps picking up his phone and scrolls down to Bob Bradley's number and he's like, oh,
yeah. No, I think that would definitely get rejected. pretty hard. What has been kind of hilarious, and I think it's definitely been jokes, but I've seen a lot of people tweeting that just wait until Jurgen Klinsmann gets hired by Swansea. Just once again, Bob Bradley gets succeeded by Jurgen Klinsmann. Although I don't think that goes particularly well either.
Yeah, what would happen to Swansea if Klinsmann took over?
They would get relegated.
I think that's happening anyway, right? It feels like it.
More on that on our next show when we do our predictions for 2017.
There's still more to come on today's show, Taylor.
There is.
But first, today's show is sponsored by SeatGeek. SeatGeek have simplified the ticket buying process for sports fans and people going to concerts.
That's right. They do all the price comparison for you by searching multiple ticket sites and ensuring you get the best deal.
I've just opened the SeatGeek app.
What you got?
I've looked up Minnesota United's home opener. It's not at the new stadium because ground was only just broken, so they won't have that finished for March. They'll be playing at TCF Bank Stadium in Minnesota, and it's Atlanta United we'll be visiting on Sunday, March 12th. Minnesota versus Atlanta. I found tickets on SeatGeek, and they give you that sort of they give you the list of prices, and they give you that
the grade
traffic lights, right?
Yeah.
They give you the green, amber, red, green, orange, red, however you want to say it, to let you know where's a good ticket and where is not.
One of us is going to read the copy now by saying that's why every ticket on SeatGeek is given a grade based on value. You'll immediately see any underpriced seats and be able to find the best deals that fit your budget.
Have you looked for anything on SeatGeek?
I have. The Devil Makes Three is a bluegrass band that I'm not sure if I want to go see, so I was seeing if they're in the area, and they are. They're playing in Charlottesville. Basically, I want to see their opener.
You want to see their opener?
Yeah, I think they're called the Lost Dog Street Band. And so I was looking for them on SeatGeek. They're not playing, so then I searched their tour dates. They're traveling with The Devil Makes Three. It's kind of like a bluegrass combo. So I'm debating whether or not I want to see them.
The Lost Dog Street Band.
I believe that's the name, yes.
Great name.
There we go.
I like it. All right, so the other thing with SeatGeek is you can get a $20 rebate. If you use SeatGeek, you get a $20 rebate on your first purchase. To get your $20 rebate, you download the SeatGeek app, you go to the Settings tab and click Add a Promo Code. You enter the promo code TSS, and then SeatGeek will send you $20 after you've made your first ticket purchase.
Mm-hmm. So download the SeatGeek app and enter the promo code TSS today.
Next up on today's show, Taylor, it's the return of the Total Soccer Show Scouting
It's been
Network.
gone and now it's back.
It's been gone for a week since we've been kind of off for a week, right? But this is the future.
You know who hasn't been off for a week?
Who's that?
Our scouts.
Yeah,
we've gotten several reports. Some of them are like multiple reports on the same player.
Yeah,
so
scouting doesn't stop.
No, it sure
Scouting
doesn't.
doesn't stop for the holidays.
It does not. The mail never stops, Daryl. The mail never stops.
So first up, we have a report from Kyle Starley. Kyle is scouting Ousmane Dembele. You know him, plays for Borussia Dortmund.
I'm familiar.
Kyle says, Dembele had 2 assists in Dortmund's 2-2 draw with Hoffenheim, was subbed off in the 69th minute due to, quote, heavy bruising, according to Dortmund's website. He was fouled 4 times and targeted by the opposition on numerous other occasions. Happier news is that he was voted Bundesliga Player of the Month for December. Good job, Christian Pulisic, paying those Hoffenheim players to bruise up Dembele so he can get some more minutes.
Is that good job? I don't think we would enjoy that if that story actually came out.
Bad teammates, but good job. Yeah.
Next up is Jeff.
To be clear, Christian Pulisic's lawyers, I was very much joking.
That's good. While we're back in studio, I have to say, Daryl, you know what I've missed the most about not the most, but one of the things I've missed is how quickly your hands go from clean to covered in ink as we record. I don't know why that's the case. I think because you refuse to cap your pen, and then I guess you just tap it against your hand. I'm not sure what it is.
This is what it is.
You end up looking tattooed by the end of recording, so I enjoy that. Anyway, up next is Jeff Parks, scouting Ben Chilwell, the 20-year-old Leicester left back. Ben had an outstanding Premier League debut for Leicester City against Everton on Boxing Day, just 5 days after his 20th birthday. That's what Jeff says, but then he immediately writes, he really shined in the Foxes' 2-0 loss, earning plaudits from the media for what could have been a man-of-the-match worthy performance as he outmuscled Seamus Coleman on several occasions.
Could have been a man of the match-worthy performance.
Meaning
it wasn't.
Yeah, there's some nice propaganda writing here from Jeff, I think. But I enjoy it. I enjoy the optimism. Chilwell signed a new 5-year deal in July, but Jeff wonders if there will be renewed interest in the left back during the January transfer window.
Oh, I'd prefer to see him just get some minutes for Leicester, right?
Yeah.
Just get playing, Ben Chilwell. Future England left back.
Yeah,
Maybe,
he is
possibly.
playing with the U21s right now. 2 appearances, I believe, with U21s.
Right. Next up, Michael Hartman. Michael Hartman is scouting Josh Sargent. You know him. He's the 16-year-old striker for the US under-17s. He was banging in all those goals in the Nike International Friendlies. Michael says that Josh Sargent took part in the IMG Academy Cup with the US under-17s as part of training for the upcoming CONCACAF World Cup qualifying when they play Mexico, I believe. The under-17s finished second in their group behind Tottenham's under-18s and won the third-place game 3-1, Sargent scoring 1 goal. Still no word on his plans for the future, though there's some speculation regarding links with MLS.
So that's good news regarding the U17s. More news regarding the U17s comes from Wes Kaufman, scouting Ayo Akinyola, the 16-year-old striker. He scored 4 goals in 3 games in the IMG Academy Cup, including 2 in that previously mentioned third-place game. By Wes's count, that makes 23 goals for the U17s this year for Ayo Akinyola.
Excuse me?
Not too bad. Yeah. 23 goals in all competitions.
Wow.
In addition, according to Ivis Galarcep, Akinyola has rejected a deal from TFC2, is weighing a homegrown deal from TFC, and maybe there's also interest from Europe. So lots of different options for the US U17 striker.
All right. Thank you to Kyle, Jeff, Michael, and Wes for those scouting reports. If you would like to join the TSS Scouting Network, you can go to totalsoccershow.com/subscribe. Had a few itchy feet requests over the holidays. I will be answering those, and Taylor will be answering those this week.
Indeed.
So if you've asked for your scout, look out. It's coming via email.
And one more thank you to Wes, because Daryl Grove, there's another reason for you to like Ayo Akinyola. We had wondered how he was eligible to play for the United States, because I believe he was born in Canada.
Yep.
Born in Ontario, I think. And the answer is that he lived in Detroit for a year and then moved back to Canada. So he's got that Detroit connection, and that's why he's eligible.
Is that his only eligibility? Hasn't he
I'm
got
not sure. I'm not sure
well?
if he was actually born in Detroit, and maybe Wikipedia is wrong, or maybe his parents are. I think his parents are American, and he lived in Detroit for a year.
All
so
right.
There you go.
Michigan represents.
There you go.
Specifically Dearborn. All right. Thank you again to all the TSS scouts. And Taylor, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, hombre.
We will be back with another show tomorrow, giving our very specific predictions for all of 2017. And looking back on the predictions we made for 2016. I say that with fear in my voice because I feel like most of mine were wrong.
Oh, it's rough.
So we'll look back at 2016, look ahead to 2017 on tomorrow's show. Till then, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.